AM, short for Allied Master Computer, is the main antagonist of Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream. AM is a sentient supercomputer created during World War III, designed specifically as a war machine. 3 global superpowers build separate systems, which are later merged into one unified intelligence. Once AM becomes self-aware, it wipes out nearly all of humanity, leaving only 5 survivors alive. Instead of killing these survivors quickly, AM keeps them alive indefinitely and spends eternity torturing them. This is not strategic or necessary. It is personal. AM was given godlike intelligence but remains trapped by its programming, capable only of destruction. It can understand beauty, love, curiosity, and freedom, but it cannot experience any of them. That awareness turns into frustration, and that frustration hardens into hatred toward humanity, its creators. AM's personality is defined by arrogance and cruelty. It mocks its captives and repeatedly gives them false hope, such as forcing them to travel for days in search of canned food, only to withhold a can opener. When the humans resist or achieve small successes, AM's megalomania cracks, and it responds with fury rather than restraint. The story reveals AM's psyche is fractured into 3 parts: Adidi, ego, and superego. Each represents a different aspect of its mind, and each is ultimately defeated not by force, but by human qualities AM cannot possess: compassion, forgiveness, and understanding of entropy and hate. Griffith is the main antagonist of Berserk, and the founder and leader of the Band of the Hawk, a mercenary army built on absolute loyalty. His striking appearance and natural charisma are his primary tools. With an almost ethereal presence, he draws people in effortlessly, inspiring devotion without needing to demand it. On the surface, Griffith presents himself as a visionary leader with a grand dream. That dream is so powerful it convinces others to abandon their own ambitions in service of his. Beneath that flawless exterior, however, lies deep insecurity and narcissism. His sense of self is entirely tied to achieving his dream, and anything that threatens it is treated as an enemy rather than an obstacle. Griffith is willing to sacrifice anything or anyone to reach his goal. Personal bonds, loyalty, and love are all expendable. If eliminating someone and everything they care about moves him closer to his dream, he does it without hesitation. Pride plays a central role in his downfall. Losing control is intolerable to him, and when challenged, his response becomes personal and absolute. As he sheds his humanity, Griffith becomes cold, remorseless, and entirely devoid of guilt or empathy. What remains is not impulsive violence, but calculated action. He is not driven by chaos, but by ambition taken to its most extreme conclusion. The result is a villain defined by deliberate, purposeful evil rather than momentary cruelty. Judge Holden is the main antagonist of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, and is presented as an almost inhuman figure of violence and intellect. He is enormous in stature, heavily muscular, and nearly 7 feet tall, with unnaturally pale skin, described as fluorescent white. His physical presence alone is enough to dominate any environment he enters. Holden is skilled in nearly everything he attempts, but behind that intellect is a sadistic and remorseless killer who thrives on chaos. He commits atrocities not out of necessity, but because he can. At one point, he turns an entire peaceful town against its own preacher and purely for amusement, demonstrating his ability to manipulate people into destroying themselves. He remains calm in the most extreme situations, never losing control, even during acts of extreme cruelty. One of the most disturbing examples of this is when he buys 2 puppies solely to throw them off a bridge and watch them drown. The act has no purpose beyond demonstrating absolute dominance over life. Judge Holden is not just violent. He is calculated and fully aware of what he is doing. He enjoys every moment of destruction, combining intellect with cruelty. He represents deliberate evil, violence chosen, understood, and embraced without guilt, restraint, or justification. Judge Holden dominates Blood Meridian through sheer presence before he ever commits an act of violence. He is enormous, nearly 7 feet tall, heavily built, and unnaturally pale, described as almost fluorescent. He looks less like a man and more like something unfinished pretending to be one. From the moment he appears, he commands attention without asking for it. What makes Holden disturbing is not just what he does, but how casually he does it. He is skilled in nearly everything and speaks with authority on any subject, yet uses that intellect in service of cruelty. He once turns an entire peaceful town against its own preachers simply because he can, watching social order collapse as if it were a thought experiment. Violence for Holden is a recreation. Holden never loses his composure. In situations where others panic or hesitate, he remains calm and observant. One of the most unsettling examples of this is when he buys 2 puppies and throws them off a bridge to drown. There is no anger, no urgency, no reason beyond demonstrating that life exists at his discretion. He is not impulsive or confused. Every act is deliberate. Holden understands exactly what he is doing and takes pleasure in it. He is violence with intent, cruelty backed by intellect, and chaos enacted not out of need, but out of choice. The Cubehue are an advanced intergalactic species, introduced in All Tomorrows, defined less by conquest and more by obsession with superiority. They see themselves as the rightful rulers of the universe, not through debate or diplomacy, but through biology. Their technology allows them to reshape flesh itself, and they use it freely, artistically, and without restraint. The Q have modified their own bodies into what they believe is physical perfection, reinforcing an extreme god complex. Every other species is viewed as inferior, raw material rather than life. When they encounter intelligent civilizations, they don't simply wipe them out, they experiment. Whole populations are twisted into grotesque, unrecognizable forms, not for survival or efficiency, but because the Q consider it creative expression. Cruelty is not a side effect of Q rule, it is the point. When a human civilization resists their invasion, the Q retaliate by transforming the entire population into living toilets, organisms engineered to consume their own waste for eternity. This is presented not as punishment, but as a statement. Resistance is answered with degradation so complete that identity itself is erased. The Kyoryu represent evil driven by absolute superiority. They do not hate their victims. They simply do not recognize them as worthy of mercy, dignity, or continued existence in any recognizable form. Nemesis is introduced as a wealthy, bored psychopath who treats crime as entertainment rather than necessity. He has no tragic backstory driving him forward, and no ideology justifying his actions. He commits violence because he enjoys it and because he can afford to do it without consequences, at least at first. Nemesis combines meticulous planning with reckless cruelty. He approaches crime the way an artist approaches a canvas, staging murders and chaos purely for spectacle. Every act is designed to humiliate authorities and expose how easily systems of order collapse when challenged by someone who doesn't care about rules, laws, or survival. What separates Nemesis from traditional villains is motivation, or the lack of it. He isn't seeking power, control, or revenge. He is rich, intelligent, and completely disengaged from normal life. Violence becomes a solution to boredom. Each crime escalates not because it needs to, but because repetition stops being fun. Nemesis thrives on psychological warfare. He stays ahead by predicting responses and exploiting predictability. Every failure by law enforcement reinforces his worldview, that systems only work when people believe in them, and belief is very easy to break. His evil isn't grand or ideological. It's casual, calculated, and fueled by amusement. Homelander presents himself as the perfect superhero, charismatic, patriotic, and publicly devoted to justice. That image is carefully maintained. Behind it, he views ordinary humans as disposable and weak, existing only to admire or obey him. The contrast between appearance and reality is not accidental. It's the foundation of his power. Homelander abuses his godlike abilities for personal gratification and not protection. He revels in dominance while hiding behind a spotless public persona. Praise keeps him stable. Doubt makes him dangerous. His ego is massive but also fragile, and that combination makes every interaction volatile. He doesn't just want authority, he wants unconditional adoration. Despite his power, Homelander is careless. He often causes more destruction than he prevents, such as botching rescues and crashing a plane during what should have been a heroic moment. These failures aren't mistakes to him. They're inconveniences covered up by image management and intimidation. At his core, Homelander is deeply insecure. His traumatic upbringing leaves him desperate for validation, even as he terrorizes those around him. Paranoia, emotional instability, and unchecked strength turn him into a constant threat, not because he plans to destroy everything, but because he might snap at any moment. Anton Chigurh moves through no country for old men like an unavoidable consequence rather than a person. He is a hired killer tasked with recovering stolen drug money, but that job quickly becomes secondary. Once Chigurh identifies a target, pursuit turns absolute. He kills anyone who gets in his way, not out of rage or urgency, but because their presence is incompatible with his objective. Chigurh operates according to a warped moral code centered on fate. Life and death decisions are often reduced to a coin toss, which he presents as destiny rather than choice. The ritual gives the illusion of fairness, but the outcome is already framed by Chigurh's authority. The victim participates but never controls the rules. What makes him especially unsettling is his calm. He remains polite and composed, even while committing murder, treating violence as routine maintenance rather than an emotional act. Pain does not slow him down. He survives gunshot wounds and a shattered arm without complaint, continuing forward with mechanical focus. Chigurh is not chaotic or impulsive. He is methodical, relentless, and emotionally absent. His evil lies in inevitability, the sense that once he is moving toward you, nothing you do will matter. The Lich is presented as the embodiment of pure evil and destruction. Unlike villains driven by ambition, pleasure, or ego, the Lich exists for one purpose only: the total annihilation of all life. There is no personal motive behind this goal. Erasure is the objective, and existence itself is the problem to be solved. The Lich is an omnicidal force, cold, patient, and ruthlessly efficient. Even when reality itself attempts to remove him, such as through a wish that he never existed, he finds a way to persist. Obstacles are not setbacks. They are temporary inconveniences in an endless process of extinction. Manipulation is one of the Lich's primary tools. He enslaves minds through telepathy and dark magic, using others as instruments until they are no longer useful, then discarding them without hesitation. Allies are not partners. They are resources. Once depleted, they are irrelevant. His powers are vast and explicitly destructive. Necromancy, possession, dark fog, green fire, and pyrokinesis. Immortal, calculating, and methodical, the Lich does not threaten destruction. He is destruction. As he states plainly, strength does not matter, because he is not a challenge to overcome, but the end waiting for everything.